With no words enough as a tribute to late General Rawat, the summation of overall sentiment would come to something like this. That is his operational transforms turned into national security reforms and ushered a new era of military diplomacy in India. However, it's hard to say anything about those whom you personally only know on basis of sentiments. Hence, today we have two of General Rawat's closest collaborators and dear friends, and also to discuss on the topic to clear the air about the void and the manifestation for this departed national hero. We have with us alphabetically Lieutenant General Ashok Shivane and Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare. Lieutenant General Ashok B Shivan, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, is the former Director General of the Mechanized Forces and has served in several key staff and command appointments. Besides the Indian peacekeeping forces at Guatemala as part of United Nations, the general has been awarded the Chief of Army Staff Commendation and Army Commander Commendation and was honored to be the honorary ADC to the President of India for his distinguished services. He is a security advisor and defense analyst, and his penmanship has several publications to his credit, being a scholar on counterterrorism, geopolitics and strategy, and national security and capacity building. He is also globally recognized as a frontline COVID warrior and active member of several social service organizations. General Shivani is presently a distinguished fellow at Center of Land Warfare Studies and holds COAS Chair of Excellence. Welcome to Diplomacy Direct, General Shivani.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Lieutenant General Vinod Khandare, PVSM, AVSM, and is a recipient of Gallantry Award, the Sena Medal, and the United Nations Medal. The President of India has conferred on him the two highest awards, that is Param Visishta Seva Medal and Ati Visishta Seva Medal. He was the military advisor to the National Security Council Secretariat of India at the secretary level from 2018 to 2021. After his superannuation in 2018, before which he served as both the Director General of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff for Intelligence from November 2015 to January 2018. He was the second military advisor in the history of the National Security Council Secretariat of India. So welcome to Diplomacy Direct, General Khandare, sir. The center actually proposed the CDS position since post-Kargil era and gained momentum during 2016. Since 2019, General Rawat sir self-defined the roles and responsibilities for this position after his deep selection for the CDS, a role which had an umbrella framework at that time. And responsibilities like reforms, achieving jointness in the inter-services operations, integration and unification, theaterization of commands, overseeing comprehensive capability development plan, processes and procedures for his offices and those of the military affairs as a new organization altogether. The pace with which he achieved the laying of the foundation for his office in 3 years was remarkable. The media has filled the air with cliched statements like General Rawat's successor has big shoes to fill, which is actually an understatement, because talking about the first general to hold this position must have come complementary with his vision and foresight towards what he started. So there are two questions embedded in one here that are: what is the intellectual property undisclosed national strategic asset that the nation has lost by passing away of General Rawat, and what can we say was that on his agenda that remained unfulfilled, where the succeeding CDS will have to start from, where General Rawat Sahab left at? Gentlemen, please discuss.
Yeah, would you like me to comment?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay. When you talk of the loss of intellectual property, we must look at the role of the CDS and as part of the entire national security apparatus. And that institution of a CDS is an office which is above all. So the aspirations that we derive from the CDS, which took a long time to come, but was a critical part of a nation's growth and regional and global rights. The three things that come to my mind when you talk of the CDS and its intellectual aspirations. The first is the politico-military harmony that this office must derive, because national security is a whole of nation approach. And like Vinod Khandari said, it is much more than borders, it is much more than defense. There is economic security, there is environmental security, there are many, many facets of national security, but each component of it must be well-oiled, integrated to have a holistic response. Unless you have a holistic response, you will not be able to cater for the future threats and develop the capabilities that need to be developed in as aspirations of a rising of a regional power and a global power, which is going from a spectator to a player. So therefore, politico-military harmony is a key factor to be able to give the correct military advice, as also influence the other facets of national security. The second thing that comes to my mind is to develop future capabilities for future wars, and therefore tri-service synergy, tri-service integration, and looking at future domains of warfare and preparing yourself for future domains, whether it is AI, whether it is cyber, or IW, you name it, whether it's space-based capability development. These have to be developed now and as joint capabilities, joint structures, joint outcomes, which are much more efficient than individual service outcomes. And that is something which is again the charter of the CDS, because he is responsible to overlook at all this for defense preparedness, tri-service defense preparedness. The readiness and effectiveness is the domain of the service chiefs. The third thing that the CDS aspiration from the CDS office is, as part of the nation to achieve strategic autonomy, or what we've been now saying self-sufficiency in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat. There is a need today, as we rise as a nation, as a global power, with a say in the global arena, that we develop our integral defense capabilities so that in times of crisis or otherwise, we have no linkages to fall back on. Having said these three things, I think the intellectual property loss actually is not taken place, but this intellectual property foundation has been laid by General Rawat. You must understand the CDS is the office, there will be a baton which will be passed from one to the other. And all decisions that are taken in CDS office are not a one-person decision. They're top down, there's a bottom-up iteration. They're put on files, they're circulated. The three service chiefs are taken on board. There are many discussions. So the foundation had been laid, an intellectual foundation had been laid. The baton will be passed to someone who will take on from thereafter. That's how I look at passing it down. But the visionary approach, the ability to take bold and time-bound decisions, and the ability to look at future warfare and prepare the defense forces as a tri-service capability building, I think is going to be of essence. The second part of your question, which comes down to about the next gentleman who's going to take over as the CDS, and therefore, what are the agenda that remains unfulfilled, which he'll have to do it. I think he will just have to carry forward the agenda. The agenda has been well laid. It has to carry forward the agenda. And if I was to look at three key issues that he must do or must carry forward in his tenure, is contribute to the national security strategy, because unless you have a national security strategy, you will not have an integrated policy and decision making. I think that's a very critical aspect. We may have an unsaid national security policy strategy, but that needs to be institutionalized, and the next CDS should play a key role in that. The second more important thing is tri-service synergy and tri-service integration for tri-service capability building, whether it is structures in terms of theater command. That is only one aspect of it. There are many aspects of tri-service capability building that needs to be focused and synergized. There will be obstacles, there will be things, but then beyond the time, the discussion should stop, bold decisions taken, and moved ahead. I think that is the second thing. A third thing that I would look at is beyond tri-service, we need to envision our future threats and capabilities. As a nation, so far, we have been more reactive to threats. And therefore, we built our capabilities based on threats which are manifested or comparing threats. It's time that we look at the future warfare. It's time that we look at capability generation to meet those future warfare 20, 30 years ahead, if you can envision what's going to be there, and be prepared, because capability building takes time and threats will manifest much faster. So unless you look at the future and develop your capabilities by envisioning and strategically thinking of how the future is going to unfold in the entire battle space, in a tri-service domain, whether it's seas or aerospace or ground, or in the non-kinetic domain, I think that is something that needs to be carried forward, which was well begun by General Rawat. Thank you.
Vipul, I'll take on from here. The issue about your question, I won't literally go into it, but let me take it on ahead from here. The first thing is General Rawat began well, and we have to understand that General Rawat began in the direction which the government has taken. The government has taken a direction of getting a national transformation. So if the entire nation has to transform, you look at the various initiatives which the government has taken in various ministries, departments. General Rawat was leading the military reforms along with the others in the department, the Ministry of Defense. The Raksha Mantri was there, the Secretary of Defense is there, the Secretary of Defense Production is there, the Secretary of Research and Development is there. All these people jointly were taking it ahead, and they still are. So when General Shivani says passing the baton is exactly like a relay race, where the direction is known. What is extremely important is the momentum should not be lost and the direction also should not be lost. So it is quite clear that military reforms are the need of the hour. You look around all over the world, you realize whichever nation has gone in for military reforms, it's not a one-day affair. It's not a 1 month affair. It's not a 1 year affair. It takes a decade, at times even more. In fact, you look at Russia. It's taken 10 years, and now also they are auditing as to whether they have reached the correct spot or whether they are in time for it. You look at China, 2015 onward, they've been doing reform. They're still auditing themselves. So while the nation may be in a hurry, and the nation should be in a hurry, but at the same time, you recollect in the past, people have said, there are a lot of leaders who are in a hurry, but then they should look around that they don't fall in a trap. They don't go astray because they are in a hurry. So it has to be sure-footed. The direction has to be absolutely clear where we are heading. So like if you're looking at the modern warfare is definitely different from what we have experienced so far. So you have got to prepare for the future. While you learn from the history, you definitely should learn from the history. You have cyber, you have space, you have technological differential with your adversaries. So if the technological differential has to be made up, we have to first be clear what changes do we need and how do we achieve with synergy from the other organs of the government, from the other elements of the Ministry of Defense. We have embarked on the Atmanirbhar Bharat. That is one of the biggest contributions of this government, as well as General Rawat was wholeheartedly into it. In fact, I would like to remind that late Sri Manohar Parikar pushed it. Then you had General Rawat taken it on. In between, we had even late Lieutenant General Thodge who was pushing it ahead. So we've had a lot of good people, and believe me, there are countless number of people fully immersed into it, silently working their way and wanting to bring Atmanirbhar Bharat, because that is the essence of being strong. You cannot have the kind of dependence. You may call them strategic allies, but strategic allies up to a particular point where the national interest does not bring a fault line between the true allies. So that Atmanirbhar part is something which the next CDS will have to take forward. And the earlier the better. But at the same time, there is a caution that while doing so, we should not create unknowingly, unintentionally, a kind of vacuum of capability. So you've got to be concurrent, capable, effective, and continue to move towards Atmanirbhar. While we are doing that, the current scenario is such that you have to do a technology scan beyond the hill. You cannot be only looking at technologies which are visible to you. I always describe niche technology which we must have. Then we should focus on the emerging technologies and look for solutions, whether they are within India or where they are with strategic allies. And we must make every possible endeavor with the help of Ministry of External Affairs to get that kind of a technology. And there is yet one more technology which is beyond the horizon. That is the incubating technology, which is possibly only in the minds. So the kind of human resource that we need to induct and the kind of synergy that we need to have with the academia, with the research establishments. And here, let me tell you, General Rawat was quite focused. He had extended the envelope to a level where he was interacting with his equivalents, foreign allies, and he was working on these silently. And the government also pushed in the issue of both the external affairs and defense together. And that's where you saw the 2+2 dialogue coming in. And that's where the three service chiefs as well as General Rawat were pushing and getting our focus on the neighborhood as well as with strategic allies who have the capability of giving you technology. Obviously, we do not expect them to give us the best, but obviously how close to the best is what you have to look at. The politico-military aspect which General Shivani mentioned, I would like to add one more point here. Along with the politico-military, we have to add the bureaucratic part also. To synergize between the political leadership, the military leadership, and the bureaucratic leadership is where this trident will take us at a faster pace. So that's where the government went in for creation of the Department of Military Affairs, which was headed by the CDS as a secretary, which essentially means that the military leadership takes a decision and the Department of Military Affairs in a particular segment, which is clearly categorized and the charter is given there, the mandate is given there. So he was to drive it and he was driving it very well with the help of the additional secretary and the joint secretaries who have been posted under him. So the next person also has to look at going beyond the military domain, going to domains of modern warfare and achieve that kind of gap coverage in terms of capacity and capabilities so that our adversaries get deterred based on what capabilities we develop. And thereafter, we would be definitely looking at going and leapfrogging ahead of the adversaries rather than just trying to do the catch up incrementally. Because as you focus only on incremental basis, you will never be able to bridge the gap. So I think that is, in a way, looking, although there are many more issues which the next CDS should be doing, but I think we've been focusing only on some of the issues which are important.
Sure. So basically talking, like you rightly, the beyond the hill and beyond the horizons kind of outcomes or the joint outcomes that the government been planning the reforms about. And now connecting that with the CDS role ambit. So again, the Space and Cyber Command, the information warfare, the electronic warfare, nuclear command authority, ex officio secretary of the DMA, like you just mentioned, the combined theater training or the joint international trainings, logistical efficacy, capability development, artificial intelligence, then the arm of robotics combined to it, and then the autonomous systems like your Iron Dome technology or the light strike drones, and etc. So anything and everything that can impose a deterrence on aggression from China or any other front for that matters, keeping the missiles with the strategic core commands or to decouple and create a missile command for effective deterrence and so on and so forth. So to tackle the momentum on all these center faces critical succession question right now, right? So ambiguity is the biggest enemy of the governing mechanism of any setup, says General Shekatkar. So looking at the China theater, the position should take an immediate effect with at least VCDS officiating. So this is a general sentiment, who also can become the CDS later on. They say that the first 3 CDS appointments should come from army as the China theater activities are gaining momentum. And here some nested questions arise. Here they are. So what is under deliberation for the current selection? What parameters should be factored in for the appointment of the new CDS? Will there be a possibility of a deep selection yet again, like we saw the first time also? And what should the longevity of this role be set for, apart from the stipulated, which is up to 60 years or a maximum 3 years of service in the position, for the linearity of the thought and its implementation?
Yeah. So when you talk of the CDS as such, and you spoke of deterrence as a major capability that we need to, but we need to understand what a deterrence is today in modern warfare. A deterrence is a factor of capability, capability to have strategic, operational, and tactical outcomes which are superior to the adversary. Credibility is the second factor. Credibility of the national security apparatus to take bold decisions, timely decisions when such threats to national security emerge. And the third factor is communication, strategic communication, to be able to convey it to the nation internally and externally to the globe of our resolve to preserve our national interests by peace and if threatened by the use of force and other means which are available to a nation. And if you look at this deterrence capability, and the transformation is also taking place in the deterrence capability very silently. From a deterrence by punishment, which is reactive. That means you get inflicted by something and then you react and you deter it from achieving its states, or you deter it by making the cost-benefit factor negative to him. We are today in a stage where we are looking at deterrence by denial. And that is how a nation with looking at future capability must look at deterrence by denial. And that deterrence by denial is that you build in capabilities, multi-domain capabilities of what you've said, which are kinetic, non-kinetic capability, high technology capabilities, which deny the thinking of the adversary to challenge a nation. Because it is all deterrence and war is all in the mind, lost or won there. Now, having said that, how do you look at the criteria that you mentioned for the next CDS? You have to look at the national security environment, and within the national security environment, you look at the national defense threats that are emerging. Few things emerge very categorically. One, that we have disputed borders, which are very active. Two, there is an emerging domain in the seas which is acting like a maneuver which will substantially contribute towards deterrence capability. Three, you have an aerospace domain which has its own dynamics of being able to contribute very effectively to the deterrence. So therefore, when you look at the CDS, we cannot look at them in myopic visions of the color of the uniform. Nor can we look at a rotational basis. It's a professional national issue. It cannot be a rotational thing that, okay, next in the line from some other color. It doesn't happen that way. This is a matter of national security, much more than just the color of the uniform. And therefore, when you look at it, has to have a deep selection. It has to be sure-footed. It cannot be in a jiffy, because there is an institution which is filling up the gap. There's a deputy CDS. There is someone who's officiating as chairman chief of staff. So it's not that a crisis emerged. It is that the next person must carry forward what good work has been done, must look at the correct direction, and must give impetus. And therefore, what qualities you look at in the order of, in my order of priorities, is the merit, that is ability to think strategically at the national level, a visionary who can look at things beyond, envision the future, and someone who has the ability of interfacing political, military, and diplomatic harmony. Diplomatic was a very important aspect brought out by General Khandare. Second, when you have a CDS, which is at that apex level, he must have the experience while he envisions at strategic level, but he has to translate the outcomes at the operational and tactical level. Because that strategic level thinking and strategic level decision making must transform on ground to capabilities of the war fighters. That is important. So his experience in keeping with the threats, in keeping with future desired capabilities, and his understanding of not only the medium of sea for application of force or aerospace or land, but his understanding of a multi-domain warfare and the capability building that is required for synergizing joint forces operations has to be there. So that is the second part of the experience. And the third part, I do feel there is a factor of seniority, which also comes into place. It may be third in the pecking order, but that is again something important. As regards longevity of the appointment, well, when you bring in transformation, when you build in capabilities, when you build in a different culture, when you build in a different transformation that is taking place culturally, a different way of looking at warfare, these things take time. These things have to be built foundation by foundation for it to be strong enough so that there is an institutionalized approach and there is no fallback or change of direction. And therefore, a CDS, to my mind, it'll take 3 to 5 CDS to finally firm in and evolve the defense forces and the national security apparatus to the level at what our aspirations are. But for a CDS, continuity is very, very important. And therefore, a CDS, to my mind, must have at least a 3-year tenure, extendable by 2 years, ideally a 5-year sort of tenure, which must exist, because then he can conceptualize, he can construct, give a character to what he is doing, and he can at least see the beginning of its outcome. That is an important factor of both the criteria and the longevity of the appointment. Thank you.
Vipul, I'll take over from here. And let's first understand that we are talking about the military led by the 3 service chiefs and the CDS being first among is equal. Military is one of the components of the comprehensive national power. There are many other factors which have to be looked at. The CDS has to be a person who has to understand that there are many things happening in the parallel, and how does military power fit into in a synergized manner where the best can be delivered to the nation. And in any case, whatever has to be decided is decided in a manner that the CCS led by the Prime Minister decides what is the political objective. And when I'm saying political objective, I imply national objective. So if you're saying national objective, if the CCS led by the Prime Minister has decided that, look, this is exactly what we want to achieve, then they lay down that, okay, to meet this, we need the following qualities: experience, capability. So, like General Shivani says, absolutely as per the situation, as per the goals that have been decided, that kind of a selection is the prerogative of the government. And here, due diligence is exercised. A lot of thought process goes into it. It's not a unilateral or it's not a one-off decision that takes place. So it's a very well considered, and we really must respect the democratic values of our country, where everything is looked at in depth. Maybe some ill-informed people might have other ideas, but I personally feel that due diligence is given. And what exactly is to be achieved? The person is chosen as per that. Now, coming to what should be the term, you said 60 years. Actually speaking, you look at the service chiefs, they serve up to 62. So anybody between 60 to 62 is possibly at that level quite suitable. And let me assure you, I have an experience where I've seen the kind of career profiles of senior officers. And believe me, when you start looking at the steep triangle where the services reach, from the level of 1-star, that is brigadier and equivalent, to the level of lieutenant generals, there is very little difference between the caliber variation, so to say. Each officer who has crossed that level and from 1-star goes to 2-star and from 2 stars goes to 3-star is equally good. You will not be able to find a 3-star or a 2-star where you say, oh, he's not good. He's gone through such rigorous and stringent screening checks that he's quite good. But then the government is looking at the best out of these good. So I think that is how we should look at. The other sentence which you mentioned was the first so many CDSs could be army. No, I don't think we should ascribe any motives or look at a pro rata or, it depends on what is your external environmental scan, in which you say which particular domain is under threat, which is the one which in particular timelines and in particular areas where we would face a challenge. And ultimately, like General Shivani mentioned about the national security strategy, the strategy aims at what? There is a national vision, and that national vision is the simplest to understand, that my nation shall always be a winner. A person who can deliver that is the ideal CDS. And currently, we are looking at the CDS who's focused and aimed at ensuring the capacity and the capability enhancement, which means he has to understand the 3 services, their present capabilities, the voids that they have, and then look at the timeline. If our adversaries are going to pose a threat today on the land borders, and after a few years we anticipate something happening along the maritime front, and the air threat is as vulnerable as the land frontiers are. So obviously the government is looking at all these 3 things, and the CDS, whoever comes there, has to see and ensure that the vulnerabilities are covered up. Capabilities cannot be enhanced as of today or as of tomorrow. It takes time, it takes funds, it takes technology development. There is a lead time between the conception and the delivery. All these things require a long-term perspective planning, the integrated capability development planning. So a CDS is going to look at 5 years, 10 years, 15 years in that manner. The entire financial planning, the entire capacity and capability enhancement is matching in timelines with the kind of threat that is going to unfold for the nation. When we talk of adversaries, we have identified adversaries, but then there are potential adversaries also. As the situation unfolds, the best possible allies also suddenly become adversaries. So you've got to take a whole of nation and a holistic approach to ensure that the voids are filled up in and ahead of the timelines that we anticipate. So let's not go by any fixed ideas or the kinds of rumors that get floated. And at times, those rumors may be well-intentioned also, and maybe with people who may not have the complete information. I'm not saying that they are ill-informed, but maybe in the best of intention, they may be thinking good of the nation, and they may be feeling that that is the individual feeling that it should move like this. But I think grant the government that they will exercise due diligence and appoint a person who's capable. And thereafter, it is the challenge for that particular person and the entire team. In the armed forces, there is a lot of deliberation, there's a lot of discussion. Once the decision is taken, all those deliberations and discussions are left behind, and all of us put our shoulders to the wheel and ensure that the team leader enjoys the confidence of the entire team, and you deliver the best possible results ahead of the time. And I'm sure that is what is going to happen with the next CDS also.
So, talking about the operational and tactical approaches and the politico-military bureaucratic strategy for deterrence and the pertinent advisory. So, like how General Khandare, started up or initiated the military diplomacy point. So, military diplomacy may also imply that in conducting relations between states in their many dimensions, which is the core function of diplomacy as put in place. And then military's role goes beyond security and defense of the country against external threats and spills into the avoidance of conflicts, internal resilience, and then regional well-being, so on and so forth. So, as proposed, the CDS position is key to military diplomacy as seen implemented by France, USA, UK, and even China. I was watching the joint meeting of the defense ministers of the SCO, that is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the CIS and CSTO member states, held in September 2020. And I noticed the diplomatic attendees and the other defense ministers of SCO member nations, the observer members, and also the dialogue partners, all of were similar rank as the CDS in their uniforms alongside India's defense minister Rajnath Singh ji. In India, military diplomacy and strategic alliances are generally a subject matter of the Defense Ministry, with the Ministry of Defense being the lead figure. However, in the beginning, Indian military diplomacy reflected in earlier days when Field Marshal Sam Bahadur Manekshaw was key architect of the 1971 win. Now, we see examples like General John Allen was appointed to work on the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and progression from military to core diplomatic positions like General Colin Powell as the Secretary of State counterpart to our Ministry of External Affairs, or General Lloyd Austin III, Secretary of Defense counterpart of our Defense Minister. Right. Even the current Russian Minister of Defense is Army General Sergei Shoigu. So, gentlemen, what is the current maturity of Indian military diplomacy with above given references? Where where do we see our CDS position maturing for international representations, for that matters for military diplomacy, for regional conflict resolution, and military alliances? So, General Khandari, could you go first, please?
All right, I'll explain. When we look at military diplomacy, again, it is a part of the overall national diplomacy. So it is one part of it. And starting from the bottom rung, there are various ways of doing this diplomacy, in that there are embassies and high commissions which are abroad. We have our defense attaches who are placed there for very, very valid reason. And I can say with authority that a lot has changed from the last so many years, where say a decade back or even earlier than that, the defense attaches were purely looked at ceremonial figures. But, they do a lot today. They do a lot where they are picking up technology that exists abroad. They are picking up opportunities where we should get into cooperation with them so that our national position gets strengthened. So that is the lowermost rung, so to say, of what we have abroad. Simultaneously, over 100 countries have their defense attaches in India. So there is a lot of interaction between our service headquarters and even the NSCS with these over 100 defense attaches who are here. It's not just run of the mill. There are many things which happen which need not be explained in more categoric details, but a lot happens. In addition to that, we have large number of course vacancies being assigned to these foreign friendly countries, and engagement in that manner. This is the soft power projection, and we have training teams which go abroad, and our training teams do a lot where they are able to touch the lives of the soldiers and the officers in the host country, and a long time low cost investment, so to say, is done. We've had the maximum impact in, say, Nigeria or Tanzania or Tajikistan or in Botswana or Lesotho. We've had a lot of impact with our training teams doing a lot of good work. Now, there are visits. There are visits by senior officers. This is just not something where a routine visit happens. There's a lot of planning which is done. In addition to that, you have exercises which are planned. You heard of Malabar, you've heard of the joint exercises. In fact, we have exercises even with China. So these exercises are with a specific purpose. Either it is signaling or it is reading something between the lines where we want to know much more than what we know. Now, when we look at how does the CDS extend this, and is he in a position to represent the country at the apex level? Yes, definitely. This again is something which is discussed in a very pragmatic manner as to who would be the best to represent the country in which particular meeting. If you have a particular meeting where more number of democratic nations are being represented, you must always send a person who can align with them with the democratic values, and that's where you know what kind of a representation should be made. There are countries where the military is much in decision-making power position. The kind of bonhomie that gets established within the uniformed fraternity is very fast and easy to do. So that kind of pick and choose happens. Now, when you mentioned about the SCO and the CSTO, yes, we've also been looking at it. At the same time, we are a democratic country, so obviously we put our Raksha Mantri ahead, and that also signals that this country is represented by elected representative of the people of the country. And where it comes to other issues which are beyond the domain or beyond the requirement for the defense minister to deal with, he has a selected team of experts. You would have seen even in the CS2, in his CSTO and the SCO, the delegation. So while the Raksha Mantri does what he's supposed to do, and the other experts take on from where he leaves and hands over the baton to them. If there is a requirement for the CDS to represent, he will represent. There's just no doubt in the mind of the government. And similar thing, whether a serving general or a retired general has got into a position where he represents the nation, maybe it is a bit too early in our country because we've just started. We are looking at just the second CDS. Maybe it will take some time. We are looking at a comparison with America over 200 years of democratic values. And here we've not even completed the three-figure digit mark. So maybe as we evolve, there will be more of civil-military integration. And the way forward is the civil-military integration in any case. There are countries who are characteristically represented at the highest political level by retired military people, but then they have a system of conscription where everyone does it. So that obviously would be a very unfair comparison to make. But I still feel that we have a lot of ground to cover, and there are many ways that our military diplomacy can enhance our contribution. Now, recently, before I retired in the month of October, I had led a delegation from the NSCS, and it was a multi-ministerial delegation and also a combination of the public and private sector. I think that is the way forward, that you do the whole of nation approach, where it's a level playing field for the public and private sector, and you have multiple ministries going into that delegation, so that you don't come up with a reply to say, oh, what you asked, I do not know, I will have to get back to that ministry. So while the composition is supposed to be multi-ministerial composition, and the representation also of a particular level where he can take a decision there and convey it so that the time loop is reduced. So we have to find solutions, ways, and move ahead together. I think that is the only way that military diplomacy will be able to contribute much more. There are ways that MEA and MOD has been bridging the gap. You know, a lot of discussion takes place. I'm a witness to how the present Defense Secretary has been doing deep study using the Navy to promote the military diplomacy. I am a witness where I have interacted with the Foreign Secretary and Foreign Minister, and they spend a lot of time, value addition is done, and the same solution which possibly one ministry cannot take, multiple ministries pitch in. Ministry of Commerce pitches in. The Ministry of Road and Transport pitches in. You look at the neighborhood infrastructure. If you enable your neighbors, there is less possibility of their falling into a debt trap. But where we lack short in terms of capacity, then we really are in no position to do. So then we again start looking at our strategic allies, and we say, okay, jointly can we do something better so that our neighborhood, the kind of troubled neighborhood that is being planned by our adversaries, the impact is reduced. So everything is not left only to one particular ministry or a personality or a rank. I think jointly we have to move ahead, and that's what is known as diplomacy. And military diplomacy is just one part of it.
General Shivani, sir.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with all the points that General Khandare has mentioned very aptly. My starting point is that, we don't have to ape at structures and positions seen in other countries globally, because there's an overarching national interest with democratic values that is the core of our country. So while we may pick up the good and the bad points, but any such military diplomacy must have an Indian character towards it in pursuance of its national interest. That is important. My second issue that I would like to highlight is that when we talk of defense diplomacy and we talk of the whole of nation approach, defense diplomacy and development are an integrated and foundational pillars of the growth of a nation, which cannot be looked in compartment. And within each of this, you have various factors. Diplomacy is defense diplomacy, because diplomacy is not only the charter of diplomats in today's globally connected world, with the aspirations of India being a player in the global arena. So therefore, integration of defense, diplomacy, and development are the key for the growth of the nation. Now, having said that, I think over a period of time, we have come a long way since our independence. When there was distrust of a dominant military, you saw the neighborhood having a military rule, and therefore there was a strategic gap which emerged between defense capability building, the bureaucracy, and the polity. But having evolved as a nation from time to time and come to where we are today, I think a lot has been done, and towards that extent, the Higher Defense Organization and the appointment of CDS is an indication of a nation to use its comprehensive national power, including the defense or the military, as part of a nation's international affairs. Yes, there is a long way to go. A lot more integration is required between the bureaucracy, the polity, and the military. A lot more needs is desired. They are still staying gaps, but then the course is set and we are moving towards it. See, when you talk of war, it starts with a political aim and it ends with a political outcome being measured. And within this, there is a defense, there's war fighting, and there is diplomacy which has to tune the international environment. And therefore, when you talk of defense diplomacy, how you project your defense forces, how you harness your defense diplomacy for capability building, for technology, for partnerships, better understanding on matters of security which are at a global plane, whether it's terrorism, whether it's piracy in the seas, whether it is any space domain. It is important that all these are integrated. I would say that both at the political level, culturally, to integrate in the diplomacy and in the polity, the defense services at the hierarchical level has begun, but needs a much greater pace. Similarly, within the defense services, the understanding of the strategic level plane in our professional military education is something that we need to also focus a lot more. And today, when we look at India's future and realize that in an interconnected world, that you have multitude of threats which are emerging, you have to have a whole of nation approach. And therefore, few things have to be done. First is, I think, to my mind, is integration. When you talk of integration, there has to be awareness, there has to be education, there has to be interface. And the International Defense University is a key factor which will harness an approach to national security by an integrated or an integrative model in which, like I said, defense, diplomacy, and development would be harnessed and a greater understanding of diplomacy and within that military diplomacy, and as they contribute to international affairs would emerge. My second recommendation is that it's time that we came up, and I spoke of it in the earlier question also, of a national security strategy. Any policy at the national level, whether it's defense diplomacy, whether it is national diplomacy, whether it is anything that you talk of, internal or external, unless you have a national security strategy, you cannot have an institutionalized policy making, you cannot have an institutionalization defense decision making. So I think it is time that we had a national security strategy and a periodic review of the same. As we get recognized regionally, we are globally today, we are a player. So it's important for that. And when we have that, then we have to look at certain structures. Are the structures presently in the Ministry of External Affairs adequate and well integrated with the MOD to harness the aspect of military diplomacy and harness the military thoughts and military spheres of influence into the international affairs is something that we need to look at. A review of our structures if you're looking at a global power player. And therefore, I would put it that defense diplomacy in the overall context of diplomacy integrated with defense and development, thereby integrating the uniform fraternity with the diplomacy and the polity, are no more a luxury, it's a necessity for a nation's growth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So looking at the like we covered right now, institutionalized national security and the strategic gap bridging between bureaucracy and military for the tune of global environment. So though the operational responsibilities rest on the chief of three staffs, the CDS is the important advisory. Gentlemen, both of you generals, thank you so much for your time for this recording for this session. And a nation salutes General Rawat. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.